From the first page of the sealed file, the ink already seems to whisper a warning. The report is thin, nearly forgotten, misfiled in the post-war years beneath layers of bureaucratic dust. Yet what it contains is so improbable that for decades historians believed it to be exaggerated or simply misunderstood. Still, the official words are there in black and white. In the span of a single night, without firing a shot, a handful of British SOE operatives stole 3 fully crewed Axis merchant ships from inside a neutral harbor. It sounds like a myth, a wartime rumor, the kind of story soldiers tell under flickering lantern light. But cross-referencing Allied intelligence logs, Norwegian maritime records, and the meticulously kept diaries of the Special Operations Executive reveals an operation so bold, it defies belief. It happened during the harshest years of the Second World War, at a time when Britain was fighting not just for survival but for strategic advantage in an ocean hunted by U-boats. This is the reconstructed record of the covert mission known informally as Operation Postmaster. An audacious night when shadows moved like ghosts, and 3 Axis vessels vanished into the Atlantic without a single shot fired. The soldiers advancing through battlefield smoke capture the opening tension of the war's early years. In 1941 and 1942, World War II was still balanced on a knife edge. German forces had swept through Europe with alarming speed. France had collapsed. Norway had fallen into occupation, leaving its merchant fleet scattered across the globe. Some captured, some seized, some hiding in foreign ports awaiting liberation. Britain's Special Operations Executive, the SOE, had been created the previous summer under Churchill's directive to set Europe ablaze. Their methods were improvisational, dangerous, and frequently deniable. These were not soldiers in the traditional sense. They were saboteurs, linguists, smugglers, engineers, fugitives, and former civilians hardened by necessity. They worked in silence, behind enemy lines under false identities. Their victories rarely made headlines, yet their failures could shift the war's tides. Tanks rolling across European fields reflect the grinding movement of the conflict's front lines. While armored divisions clashed on land, the struggle for control of the sea became the deciding factor in Britain's survival. German U-boats hunted merchant convoys relentlessly in the Atlantic. Every ship mattered, every ton of supplies mattered. And so, when British intelligence identified 3 particular Axis-controlled ships hiding in the neutral harbor of the Spanish island of Fernando Po, today Bioko, part of Equatorial Guinea, the SOE recognized an opportunity. These ships were the Italian merchant vessel Duchessa d'Aosta and 2 German tugboats, Licomba and Bibundi. Though not warships, they served as critical supply and intelligence platforms for the Axis presence in West Africa. Neutral territory protected them. Spanish colonial authorities had no desire to intervene. Under international law, neutrality was sacred, and any breach could trigger diplomatic crises. Still, Britain needed those ships removed. The solution had to be quiet, deniable, executed in total darkness, and it required men capable of extraordinary audacity. The sudden image of a naval ship sinking evokes the silent war beneath official diplomacy. MI6 and the SOE tracked rumors that Axis agents planned to use the Duchessa d'Aosta as a listening post for Allied shipping patterns. Others feared it might become a blockade runner or supply vessel for U-boats raiding the Atlantic approaches. Its capture would deny Germany and Italy a key asset and potentially add a valuable ship to the Allied merchant fleet. But stealing it from a neutral harbor? That was something no conventional force could attempt. Fighter planes in formation remind us of the interconnected pressures on every front. In North Africa, Rommel's Africa Corps pushed toward the Suez Canal. In the Mediterranean, the Royal Navy fought massive odds to keep Malta alive. In the Soviet Union, Germany pressed deeper east. The SOE's mission in West Africa might have been small by comparison, but operations like these, hidden, silent, technically illegal, helped undermine the Axis war machine from its edges, strangling its ability to gather information or move resources undetected. Bombed city ruins mirror the devastation that shaped the thinking of Allied strategists. Every bomb that fell on London or Liverpool underscored the need to weaken the Axis wherever possible. Even in faraway Spanish harbors, British intelligence sought to break the enemy's reach. Meanwhile, in Fernando Po, Axis sailors lived comfortably aboard their ships, unthreatened and secure. They moored near Santa Isabel, a colonial port where nightlife thrived under dim electric lamps, where officers shared cigarettes with locals, where no one suspected that British commandos were already infiltrating the island disguised as civilian passengers aboard a British tug. As Allied troops land on beaches in the next image, the narrative echoes the improvisation typical of the war's amphibious operations. The SOE men arrived aboard the Vulcan, a British tug disguised as a local vessel. The mission commander, Major Gus March Phillips, a veteran of daring raids, had assembled a team of misfits and specialists, shore party scouts, engine room experts, naval ratings trained in silent boarding, and even a handful of disguised Nigerian seamen whose local knowledge proved invaluable. Their plan was simple on paper and terrifying in execution. Infiltrate the harbor at night, board the ships silently, overpower any crew without firing a shot, cut anchor lines and tow all 3 vessels out to sea before dawn. Civilians fleeing destroyed towns remind us how war's consequences often fell hardest on those who were not fighting. In Fernando Po, ordinary Spaniards and African workers had no idea 2 global empires were contesting control just offshore. For them, the Axis ships were simply part of the port's routine life. The SOE operatives needed that atmosphere of normalcy. Their best weapon was invisibility, blending in until the moment action began. Radio operators sending coded messages evoked the intelligence groundwork behind the mission. British signals intercepts had monitored Axis communications in West Africa for months, correlating ship positions, crew rotations, and diplomatic correspondence. Operation Postmaster relied on clandestine radio traffic to coordinate with the Royal Navy offshore. One mistimed message, one intercepted signal could expose the plan and trigger a diplomatic scandal severe enough to damage Britain's relationship with neutral Spain. A relationship Britain desperately needed to keep German influence on the Iberian Peninsula at bay. Red Cross nurses tending the wounded reflect the humanitarian stakes behind the SOE's philosophy. The operatives were ordered to avoid unnecessary casualties at all costs. Neutral officers, civilian harbor workers, and even the Axis sailors themselves were not to be harmed unless absolutely necessary. Britain could not afford a massacre, nor could they risk creating martyrs for Axis propaganda. Generals studying invasion maps mirror the strategic calculations happening thousands of kilometers away in London. Churchill personally approved the mission. The Foreign Office objected, fearing diplomatic consequences. The Admiralty, recognizing the potential gain, insisted it proceed. The SOE had to operate in the blurred space between diplomacy and warfare in a conflict where neutrality was respected only when convenient and violated when essential. Prisoners behind barbed wire recall what awaited any operative captured in the act. If Spanish authorities arrested them, Britain would deny involvement. The operatives could be imprisoned indefinitely, traded or worse, handed to Axis agents operating undercover on the island. Failure meant silence, disappearance, abandonment. Propaganda posters and war newspapers embody the information battle surrounding the operation. If the mission succeeded, Britain would claim the ships had escaped of their own accord. If it failed, the world would never learn the truth. but Axis newspapers would seize any opportunity to portray Britain as a pirate state. So secrecy remained absolute. Submarines gliding through dark seas mirror the stealth of the Vulcan approaching Santa Isabel Harbor on the night of 14th of January 1942. The tug's engines were muffled, its lights were blacked out. On board, the SOE team assembled their gear: ropes, wire cutters, blackout hoods, collapsible ladders, and small arms loaded but intended only for intimidation. Every sound mattered, every movement required discipline. The winter battlefield image underscores the wider war's intensity while the operatives crept toward the Axis ships. In the cold waters of the harbor, local fishermen slept on shore, unaware of the silent figures drifting through the darkness. The Duchessa d'Aosta loomed ahead, her silhouette visible against faint island lights. The German tugboats anchored nearby, smaller but equally valuable. Within moments, the SOE teams moved. They boarded the ships with astonishing precision. Sailors on the Duchessa were caught completely unaware. Most were asleep below deck. The boarding party moved like a shadow, securing the vessel silently, locking hatches before alarms could be raised. The Germans on Likomba and Bibundi resisted briefly but were overwhelmed without a shot fired. Not a single bullet disturbed the night. The victory celebration image echoes the triumphant moment when headlights flashed across the water. Signals from the Vulcan confirming tow lines were secure. In under an hour, 3 Axis vessels, crew safely detained aboard their own ships, were pulled away from the harbor. No explosions, no casualties, no witnesses willing to admit what they had seen. By the time Spanish authorities understood what had happened, the ships were already in international waters under British escort. Berlin's ruins remind us of the war's end, long after the events of Fernando Po. The stolen ships were repurposed for Allied use. The Duchessa d'Aosta served in the Norwegian merchant fleet after liberation. The operatives were never publicly named during the war. Their actions remained buried in the SOE's classified files, unacknowledged to avoid diplomatic fallout. Women working in wartime factories represent the global effort that absorbed every captured asset. Each ship retrieved meant more supplies moved, more equipment transported, more lives saved in convoys thousands of miles away. Artillery fire brings us back to the brutality the SOE sought to undermine. While battles raged across continents, missions like this chipped away at Axis logistics from distant theaters, weakening them by increments invisible in conventional military maps. American and British officers planning D-Day symbolized the growing coherence of Allied strategy. By 1944, the SOE had become an indispensable part of Allied operations. Covert missions, sabotage, intelligence, and psychological warfare all contributed to the success of later campaigns. Bombers over cities marked the war's destructive crescendo. In contrast, Operation Postmaster remains a study in silence, a mission defined not by violence but by precision, deception, and daring. It did not alter the course of the Second World War alone, but it demonstrated what small teams could achieve far from the headlines, operating in the shadows where politics, war, and secrecy blurred together. And so we close the file. The ink remains faded. The names rarely appear in monuments or history books. But in the long memory of World War II, the night a handful of SOE operatives stole 3 Axis ships from a neutral harbor without firing a single shot stands as one of the most audacious and improbable victories in the war's hidden chapters. It is a reminder that the conflict was not won only by armies or fleets, but by quiet acts of courage carried out in darkness, shaping a world that would emerge battered, rebuilt, and forever changed.